Hey everybody, welcome back to another video. Anthony here with FSU Off-Road, and today we're working on the race Jeep again, and we're going to go ahead and get the axles and everything lined up. That way we can get our rad flow shocks installed and bump stops installed. Let's get to it. Like I said, working on the Jeep here, and one important thing is we do not have our shocks yet. Our race shocks are going to be the 2.5 inch rad flow with reservoirs. They are still on order, but I want to make sure that this axle and both axles are ready for those shocks when they get here. That way we can just throw them in and be done. So what we need to do is we need to go ahead and get the axle lined up where we need it, both horizontally and vertically from the front. That way, because right now it's sitting at ride height, and we need to do the same thing for the rear. So the first thing I want to do is I want to make sure that we get the front axle straight in line with the body, and then we'll come to the front, make some measurements from the frame rail, and make sure the axle is centered in the front as well. Okay, so now that we got the Jeep underneath its own weight all the way around, all the tires off, just sitting on the axles, what we want to do is we want to find a common point on both sides of this Jeep. As you can see, we got some coil spring bend, and it's worse on the other side, so therefore it kind of shows me that the axles are off just a little bit. Definitely want to check the caster angle. The caster angle is off as well. Like I said, I just kind of put this underneath here. We can make fine adjustments as we go, and now we're at that point. Before the shocks get here, I want to go ahead and get the axles exactly where they're going to be, especially since we have it at ride height. So the next thing that I want to do is go ahead and get my laser pointer, put it on a common point. This hole is a common point on both sides. We'll make sure it's dead even on both sides. We can measure from the back side of the axle, since how it projects the laser, and we can make our adjustments on our links. Since our links are welded on one side, we'll have to take the back side out, tighten it or loosen it how we need to, and reinstall it back in. The bolts themselves aren't actually tightened. Okay, so making it easier, I've lined up this hole here with the plumb bob, and I got my laser attached and marked up on the line. You can kind of see it there where it's highlighted on the line. And when I make my measurements here from the back of the axle housing itself, let's see if you can see it, we're a little above 12 inches, roughly a 16th, kind of in between a 16th and an 8th. And if we come to the other side and do the same measurement from the axle, we're about 11 3/4. So that tells me that the axle is definitely not centered, as we have our line matched on the hole on this side. So what we need to do is we either, one, need to lengthen this side to match the other side, or two, make the other side shorter. And the way that these are sitting here, I'm actually going to make the other side shorter to kind of match this, as this one has a better angle on the spring than the other side does. Okay, after some back and forth, we finally got the measurements we need right here. If you look close enough, 11 3/4 right on the dot. Come to the other side. This is the side that we were adjusting just because it was longer. And if you get it underneath here on the back side of the housing, you turn it around right at 11 3/4. So we're right on the money for both of those. Now the next thing that we want to do is set the caster angle. It's not ideal to put it on the nut cap, but this one's magnetic, so it kind of sits pretty flush. And you can see we're just about 4 to 5 degrees. Ideally, you want that to be anywhere between 6 and 8 degrees. So we're going to set that. Brought you guys underneath the Jeep here. As you can see, our 3-link, our third upper link right here. And I wanted to show you something. Typically on all link suspensions, you try to keep that at 0, as close to flat as you can. And you can see there, we're pretty close. Obviously we have some adjustability, but it actually turned out to be super nice, super tight. Okay, so now that we got the both sides equally spaced, we're working on the caster angle. Well, as you can tell, the shock, or the coil spring rather, looks way better, meaning we adjusted our caster angle here by rotating the axle back with this upper link. We don't have the bolt in it, but it pretty much lines up right there. It's kind of hard to see in the camera. However, the way I did it, the way I adjusted it, was just use just a ratchet strap and strapped it to the top of the axle and to the lower link over there, and tightened it as I needed it to get the right angle. Now the next thing to do is to get this axle centered. So this is not ideal. Heim joint, welded joint. It's not ideal, but it'll do for this application. However, you definitely don't want that for your track bar. Your track bar, you want that adjustability on the fly, as well as your tie rod, and your drag link for that matter, from the pitman arm, which is what we have in the front here. As you can see, we got left-handed and right-handed Heim joints there, so you can twist this, turn it in and out. Obviously, we built our custom double shear bracket for the hydro assist. That way we can adjust it with this as well on the fly, and the same with the drag link there. But the track bar is hidden behind all these bars here, and it's super close and it's super tight. But this one as well has a left-handed and a right-handed on the body side mount, and by twisting this in and out, it's going to move our axle. So what we need to do is we need to measure from the frame, get a center point, go to the rear, get another center point, make a chalk line on the floor, and then that way our laser line can follow that chalk line, and then we'll be able to measure from one side of the axle to the other, from the C's, and get a point of center reference. That way we can move this axle and body accordingly to get this thing centered, and then we can tighten down our track bar lock nuts, keep it in place. And then the last thing that we'll have to do is do the toe in on each side of the axle. Okay, so we made our adjustments. You can see we're still centered on the line going up through the back of the body, and you can look up here and that body bowl is centered there, and it's straight still on our mark here, and our axle is right at the edge of where we need it to be. So this axle is now centered, and we can go ahead and tighten down the Heim joint, the jam nuts on the back side here of the track bar. Okay, so I've done this before with the Jeep, so it should be really close as to where we need it to be as far as your toe in and toe out. So basically what I did was put just like a metal bar clamp and tighten it down with some washers and the lug nuts on the outer of the hub on both sides. You take your measurement from one side to the other, kind of get a rough idea of where you want it. These are pretty close. I want to actually add a little bit more toe in for positive. And in order to do that, I had to break free both sides of the tie rod there, and also break free the hydro assist bracket there. But it's not a big deal. Now I'll be able to adjust that accordingly, need to, and then I can adjust where the bracket sits, which is what I really wanted to do. Make sure that these are set perfect, and then we can get our steering wheel alignment centered in the Jeep as well. Now that we got the front completely aligned, all of our jam nuts and everything torqued down, it's time to get to the rear. All right, so in order to do the rear, we're going to do the same thing as we did before. Find a common point on the frame, measure our axles. Since this is a 4-link suspension, I'm probably going to take one of the upper links out just to make it a little bit easier to get it centered. And then once we get the axle where it needs to be, we'll make sure we get to follow the center line as well onto the axle. That way it's nice and centered underneath the Jeep. Just finished with the axle here. Got our common points. I double checked again, and that is within a 1/16 of an inch. So we're good there. Went ahead and adjusted the links, the upper links for the centering of the axle in the back, following our chalk line and the center point of the axle there. So that is within a 1/16 of an inch as well. Got our pinion angle set to the transfer case. Right now we don't have our slip yoke eliminator, but that is on its way. So we'll get that installed, and then we'll be able to install our rear drive shaft. But now it's time to tighten down all of our bolts, get them marked up, and put the wheels and tires back on. And once that's done, we'll be able to put our slip yoke eliminator on the 231, install our rear drive shaft, install our front drive shaft, and once the shocks come, our ride flow shocks and ride flow bump stops, we'll get those installed as well. And that'll be it for the complete suspension as far as fine tuning it and everything like that. Next thing we've got to do is get everything stripped out of the interior, get this cage built, and get all the race safety specs done next. But stay tuned.